Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
You check. He plays with my heart and my emotions.
Oh no.
Fuck. Here we go. This is the blooper reel, for real. The real, for real blooper reel. Are we...
Yeah, dude.
Is that live?
Bro, that clock is running.
Oh, shit. That's 20 seconds in and we haven't even done the intro.
Laat wij, broeder.
Well, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sound Vibes with myself, the NATE, and Patty McD. Say hello, Patrick.
Doom, 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 doom. Sorry, you speaking with the airport voice. So.
Was that your airport impression of that?
I guess, yeah.
That was class.
Weak. That was weak, man.
So weak. Yeah.
It's alright, I feel weak.
How you doing, Patty?
Yeah, good. Had a large night last night, so my voice is very
Sexual.
yeah, it's just like
Sorry,
smooth.
sensual.
Yeah,
PG.
the smooth Barry White impersonation voice.
I like it. It's nice. It's calming. I might fall asleep.
Alright, then I better try and not do that.
Oh dear. So, guys, we are in studio today with one very, very particular guitar player. And all and above that, she's just an amazing human being. We have Robyn Ferguson in studio with us.
What up?
So we're going to be talking, well, actually it's between Patty and Robyn. They're going to be talking more about guitar stuff because I am not at all versed in that stuff.
Yeah, but you got to learn, brother. You got to learn.
But that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I could have just slept in this morning.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, myself as a guitarist also, it's like, obviously contextually, there's a lot that Robyn and I can speak about, but I think you as a non-guitarist should please feel free to ask anything that sounds like, what is that, bro?
Yeah, no, totally. I'll be like, hey, so what are strings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
So
it's literally that bad. I got no idea. I'm on stage and Oaks are getting ready for sound check, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why does that go there? Is pedals? What do pedals look like? I'm completely lost.
So you, as a vocalist, here's a key question: do you ever help guys carry gear?
All the time. I'm my drummer's roadie.
Oh, good. All right. Well then, yeah, blessings on you, brother. Blessings on you.
I have to be. I mean, okay, it's not just me. I think the bassist also does.
It makes it hard when you're the vocalist and the guitarist. Then,
Yeah.
No one helps you carry anything because you have to carry your own stuff.
Yeah.
I'll carry your mic for you.
Good job.
All right, so the big question, why do we have Robyn in studio with us today?
I have no idea.
All right, well...
I literally just kidnapped her. Come, you're recording today. Let's go.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening, please come save me. I don't know how I got here, and these people are weird.
This is a very confined space.
All right, I'll tell you guys exactly why we've got Robyn here today.
Okay, Barry White.
So we've been Nate and I have been discussing, all right, so we need to get more tech savvy on certain matters. And myself as a guitarist, I've started this journey of self-recording. And I mean, that follows a long journey of performing live. And I think I come from a generation where technology was something we didn't have easy access to. So, I mean, I started out with a little El Cheapo. When I bought my first guitar, it's like, all right, well, I need an amp, yeah? So I got this little El Cheapo and, theoretically that should have done the job, And, with time I realized, but this don't do the job so good. And then, eventually as a guitarist, we get what some people call gas. Do you know what gas is?
Mm-mm.
Gear acquisition syndrome.
Oh, yes.
You've heard of gas.
Well, I have lots of gas. Then.
yeah. So
I'm scared.
So
me too. This is a small room. It's gonna be
interesting. Didn't we say the first person to fart is going to be fined 100 Rand or something? So
I'm
So,
gonna
yeah.
be broke soon.
Same.
So let's hope it's not that kind of gas here today. But yes, gear acquisition syndrome. This is something we as guitarists and other kinds of musicians, we all suffer from. Because I think we all believe there's a silver bullet in the next item of gear that's going to solve all of our problems
Totally.
and make life infinitely easier. So this episode and the next episode, we've lured Robyn in to capitalize on her wisdom and experience on these matters. So yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm sorry.
Yeah, again, if anyone's listening, please go. What's the address, guys? How did I
We
get
ain't
you?
telling.
Parts unknown.
They didn't tell me where I am, and I'm not from Cape Town, so
Yeah, methods of the
Awkward.
madness.
yeah.
Oh,
No,
welcome.
totally. Thanks
You-
for having me, guys. This is
Yeah.
going to be exciting.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, let's hop straight into it.
Please.
So as I mentioned, I once upon a time bought a little amp, and what I have come to realize since then is that the terminology for these things, or the one I bought originally, is what we call a solid state amp. And I can imagine some of our more experienced listeners are like shuddering at the moment. But then, that being said, there have been solid states which are proven and tested and road rigged. But then you also find a lot of I suppose you could say more guitar purists are talking about yeah, man, you got to get a valve amp. So I think today for the layman guitarist, let's tackle what are we talking about when we're discussing solid state versus valve.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to get a lot of guys that are going to argue back and forth, valve versus solid state, and it's an endless argument. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to personal preference and what you like to hear.
Uh-huh.
A lot of guys start off on a solid state amp and then move over to valve. Some go back, some don't, and it's an endless cycle. And it doesn't just, if you buy a valve amp, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the world's most amazing tone. There's a lot more to that as well, which we'll get to, I guess. But in terms of solid state, there you generally have some sort of a modeling amp. So it is very digitized and sort of,
Less analog.
yeah.
So what are the differences? What are the impacting factors of one versus the other?
So with a valve, the way you get your actual tone and such is, a valve is very similar to a light bulb.
Okay.
As signal passes through it, it heats up. And depending on how much signal you push through it and how hot the valves get, you'll get something called valve breakup. And valve breakup is your overdrive, your distortion sound, and or your crunch factor.
Yeah.
So depending on the size of the tube and how much signal and blah, 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 you'll get something that's more distorted or less distorted. And valves generally give you quite a warm tone. So yeah, for the purists, that is analog. Whereas when you go to solid state, it's all PC boards
Yeah.
and circuitry that provide that tone. And you'll get diodes and such that you overdrive in terms of signal, and that's how you'll get your distortion, quote unquote. So technically, if you really want to be old school about it, valves are the way to go, because that's how you'll get the warmest tone, your purest tone. It's the most realistic as such.
Because it is the original, I suppose. It is the original technology.
Yeah.
As I understand, and I may be mistaken, but I mean, the valve technology, when it first came around, we're talking World War era, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that was just the way, things were done. But later on, I believe it was transistors. Now I'm not too bright, but when transistors came into production, these were little gadgets that could perform similar work at a fraction of the price. Henceforth, new development in amplification.
Yeah, and also supposedly more durable as well, because back in the day with valves, if you move a valve when it's hot, it's very similar to a light bulb. If you bump that, it shatters, or it pops on the inside. So guys were going for your transistor solid state amps to have something that they could literally throw around.
Okay, so if it gets knocked over on stage or something, it's not going to die.
Kick it over and it's not going to die.
Yeah.
You know, then again, valve amps aren't actually as fragile as what people make them out to be. You know, it's all about maintenance at the end of the day. But it came in a lot more affordable because also during the war valves were being repurposed for other things. They were being put into radios for communication and so on. So you'll find tubes and valves all over the place, other than just in guitar amps. So they started doing transistor amps as a more affordable budget sort of option that could get a whole bunch of different sounds in one little box. You didn't have to go and experiment with tube sizes or valve sizes. You didn't have to go and experiment with putting a hotter signal through it or not. They kind of developed that to make it easier for the layman.
Yeah. So I think, so I mean, myself as a guitarist, when I bought my first amp, it was obviously solid state because it was cheap.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember that thing being a small little 20-watt practice amp or something like that. But what I noticed when later on I did actually get to play through a valve amp for the first time,
blew your mind.
Yeah, it did. So, but I think the transition was probably for me significant less so in technology, but probably more in terms of like budget, you know, buying higher quality gear.
Yeah.
Because as I understand it today, I mean, those, you know, let's call it digital amps back in the day were, you know, cheap, aimed for a cheap market and like whatnot. But you had the higher quality range too. And I think today we're really seeing a lot more of what digital technology is capable of.
Absolutely.
You know, it's coming along in leaps and bounds as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, you're spoiled for Let's try that sentence again. Now you are spoiled for choice. You have solid state amps, you have valve amps, you have modeling amps, you have profiling amps, and then you have VST options. So it kind of becomes endless. I think.
Hold the phone. So many things. I'm collecting all this information. I'm like, what the hell's a VST? And what are all these little terms that you're using? Like what is this whole different range of amplifiers, and I've got no clue what.
All right, let's break it down. So solid state would be a transistor amp.
Okay.
All right, so you use a transistor to get your power for it and your tone. Valve amp would come from a tube.
Right.
And that's your vibe there. Then you start getting things like modeling amps. So modeling amps are solid state amps which have multiple amps within it. So line 6 as an example.
So it's like a Trojan horse filled with little amps in it.
I suppose you can think of it that way.
Or more like a chameleon.
Yeah, so I mean, you would get an amp that would be quite affordable. You do get higher end ones as well, but it's aimed at a market where you can get a bunch of different sounds as a beginner without spending a crap ton of money.
You've got one of those, don't you?
A solid state modeling amp? No. I have a profiling amp. So a modeling amp would be, I mean, you get a lot of different vibes, but I mean, the guys that made it famous would probably be Line 6. I'm not a big fan, except for their newer stuff in the Line 6 Helix and so on. But they started it off. So you would literally plug in your guitar and you could get a clean sound or an overdrive sound, and then, you know, a whole bunch of effects in it as well.
So to clarify, when we're talking about a modeling amp, let's just quickly look at what are we modeling. So there are amps through the course of history that have sort of stamped their identity on the soundscape, and the preferred go-to by a variety of types of guitarists. So when we talk about a modeling amp, please correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about a gadget, like a lower cost gadget that's effectively
100%.
Simulating
Yes.
the tone and sound of very specific landmark amps through the course of guitar history.
100%. So you would, with digital circuits, get a tone and a sound that's very similar to, as an example, a very famous amp, your Vaaibs AC30, which is a very good well-known clean tone,
Yeah.
or a PV6505 kind of a sound. So that's all with circuitry. It's all made. There's nothing analog. It's all very digitized. There's a guy on a computer that's kind of made the sound and chucked it onto that. Yeah.
So whilst you getting a similar tone to that, one shouldn't necessarily expect that it's going to be exact.
Tone, no. So that's the big thing. If you had to put a Vaaibs AC30 next to a modeling amp or a solid state amp, you're going to hear a big difference because it's still not quite the real deal. It's close, but it's no cigar. Yeah.
So I think perhaps, when you talk about comparing hardware against hardware, probably a lot of the result of that comes at higher volumes, perhaps. Because I seem to remember, I haven't worked with smaller amps in quite a long time myself, as a performer and whatnot. But I think I recall one time I was actually in a music shop and I was trying two amps side by side. One of them was valve, one of them was solid state. And talking about the modeling amps makes me think, but that was actually a modeling amp at that time. And what I noticed is once I got the volume up above like 50%, the tone on the solid state modeling amp went to hell.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas the valve amp, the louder you go, the more it comes into its own.
So what's nice about solid state modeling amps is that you can get a sound similar to a Marshall that's being cranked to hell and back, at a very low volume and at an affordable price. So it's a very, very cool option for guys sitting in their bedroom that A, don't have a lot of cash to spend, and B, have neighbors right on top of them. And you want to get that tone, but at a lower volume. With valves, you have to crank the amp quite a lot to get a decent sound out of it.
Okay, so that would make a lot of sense. Now, based on my experience in studio, a lot of engineers have a collection of valve amps in order, and they mic those up, and they don't use the low budget sort of solid state vibe.
It's the purest of tones, which is why you want to use them.
So some bands that have used the lower budget stuff before, and the sound still came out relatively acceptable. Is there really, with all the crazy mixing and mastering after a track, does the difference truly shine through after that, especially if something might be a little bit overproduced?
Well, you've got some more spanners in the works.
Okay.
With amps like profiling amps.
Right.
As an example, Kemper.
Yes.
What that is a guy in studio has taken your traditional valve amp, let's say an old school AC30, or if you want to go at a Marshall or whatever you want it to be, all the way from something with very light distortion to the maximum, whatever it is. You take an iconic amp and you put it in a studio and you crank the hell out of it and you let the tubes heat up, and then you've mic'd it up with an incredibly high quality microphone, etc., and you have recorded that and put it into a digital format. So that's where profiling amps come in.
I'm assuming profiling amps are way more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, a Kemper will put you back quite a bit. Line 6 Helix is not a profiling amp. It's a floorboard, firstly, but also it's a simulating amplifier. But with profiling, what makes it really cool is that you're getting the exact amp copied, cloned, essentially, and captured in its perfect environment.
Okay.
So you also get a lot of VSTs, which are virtual instruments, plugins that you use within your recording software, which simulate that as well. So to answer your question, can you really hear the difference and such? To throw a spanner in the works, well, you get plugins and profiling amps now as well. So you could argue, do I need to spend 20 grand on a valve amp when I could use virtual instruments. Or I could use a profiling amp where I don't need to have 20 valve amps sitting on my shelf taking up so much space. I have it all within one convenient little box.
And if I'm to understand correctly, nor do you need a sound booth and
Exactly.
a microphone and all that jazz.
Yeah.
So it's just it's more of an affordable investment, especially if you're on the go, if you're a touring guy or girl and you want to.
100%.
So a profiling amp would be goals as a guitarist.
Absolutely. My personal opinion is definitely, I mean, I own a Kemper myself, and in terms of being a session musician where I need to play everything from Guns N' Roses to super death metal all the way through. I mean, with Adorned and Ash, we brutal, and then I've got some side things, where it's like reggae and all of that. So short of me actually owning a whole bunch of different amps, be it solid state or valve, and breaking myself carrying all of this, I can take one piece of equipment and literally just flick a button between them.
And that's between live and studio.
Absolutely, and that's sort of what made solid state amps quite popular. The problem is that their quality is not the same as a valve amp. If you then invest a lot of money into something like a Kemper, you would get that amp, valve amp, or the sound in the most perfect environment that it could be recorded on a thing that you can take wherever. And then,
so when we're talking about a profiler, we're not really talking about an amp per se. We're talking about a digital device which has a extendable because when we're talking about an amplifier, we're talking about a thing you plug your guitar and it goes bang, it goes loud. So the profiler itself is as I understand it now, it's a digital device which has an extendable amplification option.
So it's actually a hardware unit still, but it doesn't have a speaker cabinet to it. You would run a cable either, depending if you've got a powered version or not, you would run it into a speaker cab or straight to the desk, depending on what you want to do.
Depending on the application studio.
But what's awesome about it is it's a piece of hardware. You can take it wherever you want, be it studio, be it live, and you have so many different amp options within one piece. Technically, yes, those are all digital, but they've been cloned as such. It's the easiest way to describe a Kemper. It literally takes what you have and clones it, captures it as is in its perfect state, and puts it onto a digital
So you're able
platform.
to create your own sounds and put it in a profiler and save it and then keep it. Like, say, for example, you get into studio and you've got valve amps and you find a tone and a sound that you want, you can actually record that.
You capture that as is. You profile that as is, and you keep it.
So you're not relying just specifically on like pre-created stuff. You can create as you go as well.
The amazing thing about Kemper is, for example, I've downloaded a 6505 PV amp profile that some guy has sat in his fancy $1 million studio with his stupidly expensive microphones and soundproofing and everything, and has gotten that amp to its most perfect state and has captured its essence. And I now have that to use willy-nilly whenever I want. I can then, if I've got a really great amp myself, old school something, I can go and record it in its perfect state and put it on there and have it.
So technologically speaking, we've come a long way since World War II.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Well, I think that shines a lot of light on the main questions at hand, like what are the different technologies out there, which we've heard so much about. You've touched on VST, which is virtual instruments, which are obviously things we use more in studio than on stage.
Plugins, yes.
Yeah. So I think, given the amount of time we've taken, we've got a whole new episode unfolding here. Because I think a lot of our listeners, probably are people who would be interested to record themselves, if not for pro purposes, at least for demo stuff, to create. And I think we can dedicate a whole episode to just that, where we can unpack VSTs a bit more, plugins,
sure.
and the types of technologies used there. And of course, profilers, I'm pretty sure, will find their way into that chat as well.
100%.
So basically what he's saying is you're coming back. And we're going to do this again.
I don't think I can leave, can I?
No.
No, I'll be back.
Basically, what we're saying is you're stuck with us.
Yeah,
Dun, dun, dun.
you can be a regular here. And
There's worse people to be stuck with, I guess.
Yeah, because no one's farted yet.
Being
we
the
have to
hero.
go there.
Damn it, Nate.
It's a small room, man. It's a small room.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Close and personal.
Thank you, Robyn, so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, what a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a learning experience for myself, personally.
Awesome.
And we will be back next week with some more guitar talk with Robyn. And I really, really could use a coffee right now. Thank you guys so much for listening. Check out Blended Audio on Instagram, Facebook, all the socials. Go do your thing. Give it a like. If you liked what you heard today, please share it with all your friends. And we'll see you guys. Well, you won't see us. Why do I keep doing that?
You'll hear
hear
us.
them.
You'll hear us next week. I'm going to get in the habit of doing that. Anyway, cheers, guys.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to us ramble on about all things music and sound here on Sound Vibes, produced with the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.